Alicia from South Africa. Can a Christian date a non-believer? Answer is no. Several reasons. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, I'll read quickly to you, verse 10. And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Let not the wife depart from her husband. But, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife. Now, period. He lets you understand God doesn't want divorce. But then he comes in here to say something that lets us understand the mind of God concerning these things. Verse 12. But to the rest I speak, not the Lord. What he's saying is, the Lord had not given hadn't made a statement. Because when he started out in chapter 7, he let us know when the Lord made a statement about something. Because the Lord did make some statements when he was here. But now Paul says, okay, I'm giving you this. The Lord hadn't said this. And he didn't say this then because the gospel that he brought had not been completely consummated. So here in verse 12, but to the rest speak I, not the Lord. If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. Now notice, this is after they had been married. One of them received Christ. A brother became a Christian. A man became a Christian after he was already married. He became a Christian, but his wife was not, didn't come to Christ, did not receive salvation, was not a Christian at the time. So Paul says the man should not leave her. Don't put her away. And the woman which had an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. The same thing. If a wife received Christ and her husband had not received Christ, Paul says she should not leave the husband. But watch this. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. He says, just because one part is born again and the other one is not, that the wife is born again and the husband is not, or the husband is born again and the wife is not, it says one of them has sanctified the other by virtue of marriage. Now that doesn't mean the other one is born again, but it says there is no uncleanness now in their union because one is born again. So their children are sanctified, which means God has a right to these children. They are no longer children of the devil. God has a right to them, and so he can work on their salvation. They can receive salvation. They can be saved. They will come to Christ. Now here is something very significant. In verse 15 he strikingly says, but if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God had called us to peace. Wow. Can you imagine that God will allow divorce because the non-Christian walked away? Either the non-Christian husband or non-Christian wife walked away, and it says the brother or sister in such circumstances is not under bondage. God allowed it. That's to let you understand how serious it is that the man and his wife be born again. Or it means their separation is allowed by God. This is very significant. What that tells you is this. What that tells you. Let me read the 16th verse. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? He says the reason he advises that you do not do that yourself is so that salvation could be possible for the other party. That's why he says that. That's why he says that. So salvation could be possible. But if the unbelieving departs, let him depart. Now that suggests to us that God cares about who you get married to. If you were already married before salvation, then you got no problem. You got no problem. But before marriage, you cannot date someone who is not a Christian. I'll give you another reason for that. In verse 39 of the same book, same chapter, the wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. Only in the Lord. So here, a widow is allowed to remarry. And then with a strict instruction here, he says, only in the Lord. In other words, she can only marry a Christian. Which means, when you study the whole chapter, it is clearly understood that God expects you to only marry a Christian. So if you're dating a non-Christian, why are you dating him? What are you dating him for? What are you dating her for? It means you're planning to marry a non-Christian. See, and that's not going to work. That's not going to work. So if you were already married before you became a Christian and the other party was not a Christian, he's allowed, he says, you don't have to quit. But if the unbelieving leaves, then no problem. You're not in bondage. You don't have to cry over that. But if you're not yet married, then he says, you can't go after a non-Christian.